President Donald Trump delivering his first official State of the Union address on Tuesday, warning of the perils of illegal immigration, touting the economy, and calling for bipartisanship. The president leaned heavily on personal stories of White House guests in the crowd. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is still awake, standing by live in Statuary Hall on Capitol Hill, and joins us live with reaction to tonight's speech. Hey, Mike.
Well, hi, Shannon. Yeah, President Trump challenged Democrats to work with him to address immigration and to rebuild much of the nation's infrastructure. The president's first State of the Union address went 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 30 seconds. It was interrupted by applause 111 times. And one of the powerful moments was when the president told the compelling story of a North Korean defector who traveled thousands of miles on crutches to freedom.
Today, he has a new leg. But Sung-ho, I understand you still keep those old crutches as a reminder of how far you've come. Your great sacrifice is an inspiration to us all.
Democrats did not find much to applaud. Many did not crack a smile despite the president's outreach. When it was done, they turned to a fresh face from a political dynasty for a response.
Politicians can be cheered for the promises they make. Our country will be judged by the promises we keep.
Part of the president's healing message was making reference to the miraculous story of House Republican Whip Steve Scalise, shot on a baseball field last June and back to work 3.5 months later. After everything Scalise has been through, I asked him what that salute from the president meant to him.
It's just really special that he continues to root for my recovery, and he's a special man. He's a warm man. Many people don't get to see that side of him. I've been blessed to see it all the way through this, and I think a lot more people saw that tonight.
Other members of Congress after the address said they were really touched by the true American stories the president highlighted throughout his first State of the Union tonight. Shannon?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Thank you very much, Mike. Well, according to Twitter, tonight's presidential address is a record breaker. It is the most tweeted State of the Union or joint session address ever. There were 4.5 million tweets, breaking the previous record of 3 million. Well, the president only briefly mentioned Russia, but the topic came up plenty in the Democrats' responses. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is following that story and more. Hey, Ed.
Shannon, great to see you. The New York Times Online immediately tried to frame this speech as out of touch by writing the president focused on what he called extraordinary successes, but, quote, avoided the turmoil of the Robert Mueller special counsel investigation, even though by point of fact, every president, Democrat or Republican, focuses their State of the Union speeches on, yes, their accomplishments and avoid controversies. That did not stop Senator Bernie Sanders in one of several Democratic responses to the address from charging the president leaving out any mention of Russian interference in the 2016 election shows he has a, quote, special relationship with Vladimir Putin. But new tonight, a senior Republican close to the president told me he never intended to mention the Russia probe because White House officials did not want to step on this speech in any way. But now this Republican memo about Obama administration surveillance of Trump officials is likely to be made public by the president by the end of the week. In fact, look at this video that we've got of the Congressman Jeff Duncan asking the president about releasing that memo as he left the House chamber. The president made it clear it's coming out.
Let's release the memo. Oh, yeah, well, don't worry. 100%.
100%, he said. That memo written by House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes and his staff names ousted FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe as one of several senior officials who may have approved that surveillance of Trump officials, while the Washington Post is reporting tonight that late in the 2016 campaign, McCabe, for about 3 weeks, sat on information that another batch of Hillary Clinton emails had been found on Anthony Weiner's laptop. That fits the Republican narrative that McCabe was covering for Clinton on top of those text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page about a meeting in McCabe's office over a quote-unquote insurance policy of probes in case Trump actually won the election. Now, Democratic Senator Mark Warner, who's leading one of the Russia investigations, slammed the president tonight, saying, quote, at a time when the dedicated men and women of the FBI and the Department of Justice are under attack from the president's allies, I was extremely disappointed not to hear the president deliver a clear and unequivocal statement of support for our nation's career law enforcement officials. But Donald Trump Jr. told Fox tonight, our own Sean Hannity, that rank-and-file FBI agents support the truth coming out about the FBI leadership that in fact these agents on the ground believe it was the 7th floor leadership at the FBI headquarters that got political in the last election. So you can see even the president's family jumping in to defend him. Meanwhile, I'm told White House lawyers are combing through that Republican memo now. We're likely to see it by the end of the week, as the president himself indicated tonight, Shannon.
We await. All right, Ed Henry live early in the morning with us. Thanks, Ed. All right, the president highlighted guests to drive home his policy points, from the parents of the victims of the MS-13 gang to a North Korean defector, to the parents of student Otto Warmbier, who died shortly after returning home from North Korean custody. And after hitting many emotional chords, he spoke about potential agenda items for 2018, like a call for $1.5 trillion in new infrastructure spending and partnerships with states and the private sector.
Tonight, I'm calling on Congress to produce a bill that generates at least $1.5 trillion for the new infrastructure investment that our country so desperately needs. Every federal dollar should be leveraged by partnering with state and local governments and, where appropriate, tapping into private sector investment to permanently fix the infrastructure deficit. Any bill must also streamline the permitting and approval process, getting it down to no more than 2 years and perhaps even 1.
Chris Arwell, Fox News politics editor and editor of the Halftime Report, joins us now. It's past your bedtime.
Well, no, it's
kind of.
We're rocking and rolling.
Okay, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so listen, infrastructure is one thing that a lot of folks think the president can get some bipartisan movement on, but it was interesting. We got differing reactions from Democrats, so I want to put those up and let you react to them. Senator Dick Durbin says if the president chooses to follow through on his prepared remarks tonight, he will find Democrats ready to work with him on lowering prescription drug prices, making massive new investments in America's crumbling roads and bridges, passing meaningful paid family leave legislation, and protecting dreamers. Now, the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, says this: after a long and divisive year, many Americans were yearning for the president to present a unifying vision for the country. Unfortunately, his address tonight stoked the fires of division instead of bringing us closer together. Is this a little good cop, bad cop?
Right. I think there you see the role of Schumer, who's got to keep Democrats in line so that they can actually vote and stick together as a bloc. In the minority, unity is so crucial. But Durbin's job is to cut the deal with Trump. That's what Durbin is there for. He's there to cut the deal with Trump. So he is trying to send as many messages to the White House that he can. I'm here. I'm ready. Let's do business.
Do you think that did you expect to hear more bipartisanship in this speech tonight? Because it's something the White House kind of sold us was coming.
Well, look, we should say, first and foremost, that as a piece of stagecraft, this was an excellent speech in that way. It was a lot like the speech he gave last year, but it was it was sort of an improved version of the one he gave a year ago. You sort of switch out Obamacare. Last year it was all about Obamacare. This year is switch the immigration piece in for that. You're dealing with that. The mistake the White House made with this is they promised bipartisanship. The Washington Post, here's how it goes. The Washington Post obviously had their first edition in the can. I wish I had a print version in here to show you. The Washington Post had their first version in the can. A new era of bipartisanship or something reads the first edition. And then as the reviews are coming in on the speech, they go, never mind. Actually, dump that. And by the second and third editions, they're on to a new vision for America or something, whatever their takeaway line for him was. The White House and to a degree the president's friends in the press, they overstated how much bipartisanship was going to be here. So the parts of it that were there probably got lost, because if they wouldn't have built it that way, if they had underpromised and over-delivered on bipartisanship, you would have had a different narrative going into tomorrow.
Reaction. Okay, so the moments that seemed to have the most impact were the ones that were tied to all these personal stories.
Oh, yeah.
And so the president was able to hammer home some of his policy points by just things that brought tears to your eyes. If you have a beating heart and you saw the man who escaped North Korea hold up his crutches that he used to escape through China to get to freedom. I mean, these stories were amazing, and that wasn't the only one. There were first responders, there were heroes of all kinds.
That family, I believe he was a firefighter, and his wife, and they adopted that baby from the woman who was in the throes of heroin addiction. Mm-hmm. And you see that, and but the crutches will be the moment. Yeah, that will be the crutches will be the takeaway. That's the visual. But I gotta say, he gave a good speech a year ago. And people said, okay, maybe he can do this. This is good. They weren't sure about him. He was only a month into office. What matters is tomorrow. A year ago, the White House wasn't ready to execute. And then they wasted 5 or 6 months. They failed on repealing Obamacare a few times. And they groped around in the dark trying to find a way to do this. They finally got the tax cut passed. I shouldn't say finally. Quite surprisingly and impressively for them, they got the tax cut passed. The question for this White House now is they've got a big agenda. Can they execute? Can they put these pieces into place? And most importantly for them now, they got to get a deal on illegal immigration and legal immigration, or the rest of this is just a bunch of bunkum.
So the president, again, as we talked about, the meat of his speech, we're outlining the 4 pillars of this deal the White House hopes to put together. But overall, the speech was pretty upbeat. I mean, the president talked about how well the country is doing. He talked about the future and how we're all going to come together and we can work together and make this country better than ever. Sounded a hopeful tone. It sounded in contrast to what we heard. There were numerous Democratic responses tonight, but the official one from
Joseph Kennedy, Congressman Joseph Kennedy, that emotional support peacock that they were trying to put on a Delta flight.
Did he need that?
He needed that bird.
But is that the role of the minority to say, like, things are not good and I'm just warning you this is not good?
They were not prepared. He was not prepared for the speech that Trump was going to give. Trump did not give a bipartisan speech. He gave a partisan red meat speech where he was keeping doing what he does, which is keep that 35 to 40% of the country that's with him. He keeps them with him and they love him, and they walked away from this saying, I love this guy even more than ever. But when the Democrats had their response, he was upset, he was anxious, he was terrified, he seemed like he was afraid of the moment. Bring the peacock in, chill everybody out.
It's time for PJs for you.
PJs.
I got a few more minutes.
Peacock and PJs.
Peacock PJs. Do you have peacock PJs?
If only. If only.
Listen, I know if I get you for Secret Santa this year, I'm 11 months out, but I know what you're getting. Chris Darrell, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, the economy, a strong talking point for the president tonight, despite a tough day on the markets. So how much credit should the president get? We will debate that, plus immigration front and center during tonight's speech. One top Democrat says he's ready to work with the White House. Another says, no way, the president stoked the fires of division. Is it a good cop, bad cop game? We're also going to break down the multiple Democrat reactions to the State of the Union when Fox News at Night continues. Not surprisingly, immigration was a central theme before, during, and after tonight's State of the Union. There was the emotional moment with the family members of 2 girls killed by the MS-13 gang. The president also praised a law enforcement agent who arrested more than 100 gang members. Now, many Democrats brought so-called dreamers as guests, fighting against that narrative, sparking one GOP congressman to wonder whether the U.S. Capitol Police should be checking the immigration status of everyone attending tonight. It didn't go over well with folks on both sides of the aisle. Well, Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan did not bring a guest. He left the seat next to him open for an illegal, he said, who had been deported. President Trump scored one of his biggest applause lines tonight on this hot topic.
My duty and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream, because Americans are dreamers too. Under our plan, those who meet education and work requirements and show good moral character will be able to become full citizens of the United States. The second pillar fully secures the border. The third pillar ends the visa lottery. The fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration.
All right, he talked us through the 4 pillars they want to see in a deal. Joining us now, Guy Benson, Fox News contributor and political editor, townhall.com, and Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor and radio talk show host. Great to see both of you.
Hello. Good to be here.
Okay, so we knew immigration was going to be at the core of what he was talking about tonight, but it was also expected, obviously, by the left. We want to play a little bit of what Congressman Kennedy had to say about this topic.
Bullies may land a punch. They may leave a mark, but they have never, not once in the history of our United States, managed to match the strength and spirit of a people united in defense of their future.
Okay, don't want to read too much into that, but I think we know what he was talking about. Richard, what do you think of his response?
Well, it was an interesting response, and I think it speaks to a larger issue that I think President Trump has, that as we sort of end his first year and he starts his second year as President of the United States. If you listen to this speech on its merits, while I don't agree with a lot of the policy planks in it, it is a very typical Republican speech, something that Ronald Reagan would deliver. And you would think that he would have a higher popularity rating amongst the American people for delivering such a speech. But I think what you see here is the issue that you have, the dichotomy is a character question this president has. Some see him as a bully, some see him as sort of rough around the edges, and these character issues make it very hard for him to get support from the quote-unquote establishment Republicans as well as Democrats who agree with him on some of these issues.
Well, Guy, we've been told over the years that character shouldn't have anything to do with how these guys do their jobs and legislate and get things done.
Well, that had been the Democratic line, and now it's the Republican line. Look, I think what's interesting about what Richard said is if you look at the merits and the content of the speech, it was unquestionably a success. That was my instinct as I watched it. I thought the Democrats' reaction in the chamber was wildly out of touch with how most people would interpret what they were watching at home. And what we've seen just in the last hour from two other networks, Snap polls, scientific polls, showing 70 to 75% of people who watched the speech had a positive response to it. And you juxtapose that overwhelming majority with the Democrats who could barely look, they're at a funeral. They could barely look at the guy.
Wearing all black.
Yeah, like glum,
So
downtrodden, scowling through good news. That is not a good look for the Democratic Party
Well, they talked tonight about some of them, how they're still part of the resistance, and that's not going away. And clearly they're at odds with this president. So what else should we expect to see on their faces?
Well, I think if you bring this back to immigration, bring it full circle, I think what you notice, so we saw a couple hours ago on Sean Hannity, you had Ted Cruz come on and say, President Trump's position on the Dreamers is the farthest left you can be. He's farther left than Obama. And then I think you have Democrats who came on another network saying, this immigration policy is as far as right as possible, and it can't get any farther right. And I think it sets up where we go next week, which is when we have another showdown, another countdown clock for a government shutdown, when immigration will be the reason why this government shutdowns again.
And because that's coming February 8th.
Yeah,
that's
and
next week.
it's because this framework that the president put out is both hostile to Democrats to some extent and hostile to Republicans in another extent.
Yeah, can I just point out, it is not a far right or far left immigration proposal. It just isn't.
But if you ask Ted Cruz, he would say that giving a pathway to citizenship to 1.8 million Dreamers is the far left and instant amnesty.
Yeah,
I don't agree with that, but that's what his position
is. It is an
You're
amnesty.
gonna have some people who feel that way.
The point is the fact that you've got Ted Cruz uncomfortable with certain elements of it and the Democrats screaming white nationalism on the other, maybe there's a middle ground that Trump is actually occupying here.
But I think
well, let me read you this, because I was trying to find this part from the president. He said, based on the discussions we've been having with Republicans and Democrats, he says, we presented the Congress with a detailed proposal that should be supported by both parties as a fair compromise where nobody gets everything they want, but where our country gets the critical reforms it needs.
Oh, here's the thing. Like, the problems that I have with this framework is I think this ideal of limiting the diversity lottery is, to me, to be insane. The ideal that, we're letting all these people in. The diversity lottery is a very, very, very small number of people that come into this country, and the vetting is very severe. Just because you get picked in the lottery doesn't mean you come to America the next day. You go through a year of vetting. They look at your police records, your education records, all sorts of things.
At least one of the recent terror attacks in New York.
Absolutely, and I think that's one red herring to the fact that the majority of the people that come to this country want nothing more than to achieve the American dream.
Not a red herring, it's a data point.
But it's one example of 99.9% of people who have diversity visas who come to this country because they want to achieve the American dream. But with that being said, I do agree with the president when it comes to the Dreamers, but I disagree with him when it comes to the wall. And I think if you talk to Ted Cruz and the far right and the Freedom Caucus, they would say we disagree with all of these other parts.
It kind of sounds like you like this compromise, Richard.
No. But I think it's not about liking the compromise or not. It's about the votes. And I think the problem that this president has is that in the House, this framework does not pass.
Right. I mean, there are two different, very different frameworks. It's 1 a.m. It's 1:23 a.m. We're a little punchy. No, there has been no punch. I just want to make that clear. But yeah, the two sides of the hill are really going to have to work on this because they're so far apart right now. But this, for a lot of people, and I've been surprised by some people who I think are further to the right who've said they could deal with this. So we're out of time. Quickly, though.
Very quickly, he laid it out in 4 succinct explanations. Here's my plan, 4 prongs. I think a lot of people watching said, oh, that's a little bit unexpected. That seems commonsensical to me.
All right, we'll see. Common sense to you? Not the
We'll have to see.
Not the
The
wall.
devil's going to be in the details.
It always is. Thank you, gentlemen. And stick around. You're going to come back. Much more on the State of the Union analysis from Guy and Richard later on, including the economy that the president has touted tonight and all you need to know about the numerous Democratic responses and what the media is saying tonight. We're keeping track of all of it. Stick around. The president called for bipartisanship during tonight's speech, and he hit on themes ranging from hiring to prescription drugs to giving terminally ill Americans access to experimental therapies. Democrats did not seem especially enthusiastic.
The individual mandate is now gone. Thank heaven. Apple has just announced it plans to invest a total of $350 billion in America and hire another 20,000 workers. The motto is "In God We Trust." The FDA approved more new and generic drugs and medical devices than ever before in our country's history.
All right, Democratic Congressman Luis Gutierrez explained after the speech that he wanted America to know his party is still resisting this president. Former Congressman from the great state of Utah, Jason Chaffetz, joins us live. And you were on the floor.
Yes.
So what was the mood there tonight?
You know, a nice benefit of former member of Congress. You can still sit on the floor with all the Democrats deciding not to show up. There are plenty of seats. And
That's
so,
true.
Look, I thought the president was pitch perfect. I think it was one of the best speeches. I think he hit on themes, and he was highlighting regular Americans who went through extraordinary circumstances. But I got to tell you, it was disgusting, it was inappropriate, and I think it was flat out wrong, the way a lot of the Democrats on the floor, not all of them, but a lot of them acted. I mean, we're recognizing a police officer and his wife in New Mexico who helped a young child by adopting it into their family, and you had Democrats sitting on their hands.
See, we couldn't tell. I couldn't tell with all these now. Some of the policy things I would expect, they're not going to cheer for the repeal of the individual mandate to Obamacare. We can't expect that. But I would think for those stories and for things that are to the common good of America, that they would be standing for some of those.
The flag, "In God We Trust," protecting the border, helping our troops, recognizing ordinary Americans who went through extraordinary circumstances. And these Democrats had the gall to sit on their hands and, as Luis Gutierrez talked about, just resist. They're resisting America. They're resisting apple pie. They're resisting the flag. And I think that was in stark contrast to the patriotism that you saw exuding from the president in a very tempered way, something they said they want to see from the president. And then you saw the rousing applause by the Republicans in unison. You get tiring going up and down, especially when you're as out of shape as I am. You got to get up and down all the time from your chair. It was really an amazing speech.
Well, there were, what, 110, 115 different applause times. And, you know, that's going to happen for the party that's supporting their president. In the meantime, we have 12 Democrats, we understand, who openly said, I'm not going to go. I am leaving a seat for Jason Chaffetz so that he can go. There were others who said, I'm going to show up, but I'm going to wear all black. In protest or in support of Me Too, or, you know, any kind of ways that you want to interpret that. But an interesting point, and I can't remember if this was when the president was, I think it was when he was leaving. Can't remember if he's going in or leaving this. But a moment with Congressman Jeff Duncan. We want to play that and get your reaction.
Let's release the memo. Oh, yeah. Oh, don't worry. 100%.
So he was saying they released the memo. And it sounds like the president says 100%. We hear it's probably coming this week. What do you think should happen with the memo?
I do think it should be released. I think America is open and transparent. We err on the side of being self-critical. That's how you make things and improve things. Remember, a lot of this was about a closed case at the FBI that a lot of people felt was mishandled. The Democrats were leading the charge about Mr. Comey and felt that he was acting inappropriately. But the more we learned the facts, the more the Democrats switched their position and said, oh no, now we don't want to see it. And I just think we have to look at it in order to fix it. If there's nothing wrong, then America will see that. But this will be the first bit of evidence. The Inspector General will come in probably the next 30 to 60 days. independent. He was appointed by President Obama, approved by the Senate, 450 employees in Michael Horowitz's group. When he comes out with his report, that I think will be the most definitive word on these actions.
What do you make from House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and also the top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, Adam Schiff, saying that what the GOP has put together in their 4-page memo, their summary, is misleading? It mischaracterizes what was happening with our law enforcement agencies. Democrats say they're working on their own memo, but they can't get it released because they couldn't get it through the vote. Is that also part of the transparency, saying, all right, we'll let the Democrats release their memo too. The American people can look at them and decide what they believe?
Well, we haven't seen the memo yet, but my understanding is the Republicans that are on the Intel Committee weren't able to read the Democrats' memo before they wanted to bring up to a vote. So some gyrations there within the Intel Committee. I do think it will ultimately come out. I think the president, as he said to Jeff Duncan on the floor of the House just tonight, that he is committed to having that out there. I think the president wants to expose the truth. And shouldn't we all stand for the truth? I mean, that's... What are we afraid of? That we should want to know what happened in a closed case where there's a lot of allegations where things were mishandled.
Are you worried about the impact on morale at the FBI and other places where we know there are many, many good men and women who around the clock are working and sacrificing, and their families as well, to defend this country, to put people in jail, get bad guys and gals? Do you worry about the impact this is having on them?
Yeah, look, the rank and file people that I know within the intelligence community and within the FBI, they're good, hardworking, patriotic people who put their lives on the line for this nation. But I think they also recognize that maybe some people in management and some very senior people maybe mishandled things. And that makes them probably even more disgusted than ever. And I hope they know in their hearts that what members of Congress are doing, and I was doing when I was in the House, is trying to ferret out all the garbage so that they can actually do the job that they were hired to do. And it's sometimes difficult, and you got to call people to the carpet, but that's who we are as Americans. That's how we make things better. And we are self-critical, but that's part of America. We've been doing the oversight since 1814. Abraham Lincoln did it when he served in the Congress.
Back in the day.
Yes.
Way back in the day. All right,
Yes.
will you stick around and come back? Because we
Absolutely.
have some other things to talk about with you. Thank you for giving us
Thanks.
your time. All right, stick around. We are taking stock of reaction from the media and Hollywood elites. The president being called a racist and worse tonight after his speech. Plus highlights from the president's plans to keep the economic good times rolling and the Democrats' response to all those proposals. All that and more still to come. Somewhat complicating the president's message tonight on the economy was a big sell-off on the Dow Jones Industrial Average Tuesday. The so-called Trump bump has been a big part of the president's messaging on the economy, but stocks fell triple digits Tuesday as investors digested a rising interest rate environment. Complicated stuff, but the president is still very bullish.
Since the election, we have created 2.4 million new jobs, including 200,000 new jobs in manufacturing alone. After years and years of wage stagnation, we are finally seeing rising wages. Unemployment claims have hit a 45-year low. African-American unemployment stands at the lowest rate ever recorded, and Hispanic American unemployment has also reached the lowest levels in history.
Let's bring back townhall.com political editor Guy Benson and syndicated radio host Richard Fowler, both Fox News contributors. All right, gentlemen, all of these things about the economy are accurate descriptions of what is going on now, but the mainstream media take I've read yesterday and today leading up to the speech is, yeah, stuff's good, but it's not the president's doing.
Well, I wouldn't say I give the president credit for the year that we've had, but I think anybody who looks at you can't look at the economy in a vacuum. Any economist would say the economy's it's a building thing, right? So when President Obama got the keys to the economy in 2008, we were at negative GDP growth. Thanks to some of Obama's policies and stabilizing the economy, we saw African American unemployment, we saw unemployment all across the board start to go down. President Trump is now benefiting from that, and some of his policies are helping that. And I think because he is a businessman, because he has really worked with, like, going after corporations, saying, I'm going to work with you, he has helped in that process. But to neglect the fact that President Obama really worked on getting our economy out the ditch is a farce. And I think one thing I want to do is do some fact checking on the president's speech. We talked about saving the auto industry and getting Motor City running again. And I think if you ask the Obama people, they would say, no, no, no. We were the ones who bailed out the auto industry, and we got the auto industry back up and running again. And I think that's factual.
Well, and you know, guys, some people are still not happy about that bailout.
Well, yeah, that's a whole separate issue. I would say it would have been political malpractice for the president not to have gone through the litany of positive news that he did, because he should be trumpeting it. It'd be crazy for him not to. My argument would be vis-a-vis Obama. We have an economy that is resilient. It would have rebounded better, faster, if not for his policies that were a wet blanket on that recovery. And Trump is now, I think, throwing jet fuel on this whole thing, which is good. I was also very pleased to see his detailed, lengthy defense of tax reform, where he went through and explained not just what happened, but the immediate results, and telling Americans and taxpayers, keep an eye on those paychecks that are going to go up in the next few weeks. One small, but not that small criticism, it's like the national debt is gone. This was a Republican president that did not mention entitlement reform, which is a mathematical necessity. Yep. He talked about infrastructure spending and mandatory paid leave, for families. Not a word about reducing spending or reforming entitlements, and that is worrisome to me.
And they continue to do these CRs and these short-term agreements. We haven't had real budgets in years, and part of that is tied to sequestration in the military. Here's what the president said about what he wants to see happen on that front.
I am asking Congress to end the dangerous defense sequester and fully fund our great military.
What do you think, Richard?
Well, I think Guy made an interesting point about the deficit, because that's part of the course. When Democrats are in power, Republicans complain about how the deficit spending is awful, and when they're in power, they run the deficit up. That's like when George Bush ran the deficit up. When Barack Obama tried to run the deficit up, Republicans were like, oh no, deficit spending is awful. Trump is in power, now they want to run the deficit up, and we are saying the deficit is a problem.
Yeah, and there are plenty of folks on the Hill that are on the GOP side of the aisle, too, who think it's monstrous what they're doing with their spending. And so,
Listen, but where I will give the president, people are waiting for me to agree with him, and I think paid family leave is something that Democrats and Republicans can work on and get done. I think it's something we should have got done a long time ago. We're the only developed country in the world that does not have paid family leave. It should be a federal policy, and I think if this president wants to get something done, if he wants to reach across the aisle, it's a perfect policy initiative to do it. I'm pretty sure Guy hates it, but it's a good thing.
It's just another question about how it's going to get paid for.
Yep, and also federal mandates coming from up high across all businesses, and Trump's talking about deregulation, taking burdens off of business. There should be a new one on it. Look, Obama nearly doubled the size of the national debt in 8 years, which is an extraordinary accomplishment, if you can call it that. But part of the reason that I was proud in various elections to support Republicans is because I believe that they were actually serious adults in the room on this issue and actually care about the math, whereas Democrats don't at all. Now, it's sort of like, our guy's in, these are not his issues, so we're going to pretend like it's gone, and kicking that can on a bipartisan basis is screwing over our generation, and it bothers me.
Well, and when you walk by that clock down there on 6th Avenue in New York, and it's constantly going over the national debt clock that goes faster than your eyes can even follow it, it is a little bit overwhelming.
And so the one thing I will say that I knock the president for from the politics of it is the fact that he has this tax plan. He gave this major speech, and he's not spending the next 2 or 3 weeks to go out to the American people and sell it, going to Trump country, going to places, states that he won, like Michigan, where his disapproval rating is where it's higher than his approval rating, and selling this plan, I think, is a big mistake by this White House.
Keep selling it.
And he's not but he's not selling it, and I think that's a political mistake. You guys have
some places of agreement that may surprise folks. So thank you both. Good to see you late tonight, early in this morning.
Sure thing.
All right, some other news now. Just moments before President Trump's first State of the Union address, Hillary Clinton offered an explanation via social media for why she didn't fire a top 2008 campaign aide accused of sexual harassment. In a lengthy Facebook post, Clinton writes, "The most important work of my life has been to support and empower women. So I very much understand the question I'm being asked as to why I let an employee on my 2008 campaign keep his job despite his inappropriate workplace behavior. The short answer is this: if I had it to do again, I wouldn't." Clinton also said she believes in second chances, and she didn't want to completely terminate his employment. Well, schools are closing across the U.S. because of this year's deadly flu season, the latest an elementary school near Chicago. According to the superintendent, 25% of staff and students were out sick yesterday. If you haven't gotten a vaccination yet, infectious disease specialist Dr. Sharon Welbel says there is still time. Public health officials are urging everyone to use the 3 C's: clean your hands frequently, cover coughs and sneezes, and contain your germs when possible. Well, the Federal Communications Commission blaming human error and inadequate safeguards for a missile alert that was sent mistakenly in Hawaii earlier this month. The FCC says it took 38 minutes to recall the alert because Hawaii didn't have a standardized system for sending corrections. Late this afternoon, the person who sent that alert was fired, and Hawaii's emergency management administrator resigned. Well, the media reaction to the speech tonight has been downright hostile at times, with the president called a racist and much more. In the wake of tonight's speech, we're going to look at some of the lowlights. Next. By and large, the mainstream media doesn't seem to be buying the president's bipartisan message. Listen to this.
It's obviously intended to be a costume party, the theme tonight being to pretend to be someone you're not.
And honestly, I just don't. You know, I go through these things, especially these teleprompter speeches he gives. It's not him. So it is hard to judge these speeches because we know it's not him.
Well, that wasn't all. Later, Hollywood political activist Rob Reiner said he felt sorry for the media because they have to listen to this president.
I feel bad for you that you have to talk about this. The guy is a racist. He's a misogynist, and he is a pathological liar.
Okay, let's digest that with former Utah Republican Congressman Jason Chaffetz. You were on the floor tonight. You are also a Fox News contributor, and you have stayed late with us, or early, whatever this is now.
It's on the West Coast. They're just getting going,
Yeah, everybody, they're not even in their PJs
Utah,
yet out
California,
there.
come on.
We love it. Okay, so let's start with the first part of that, the media part, where Chuck Todd said there that, I can't even, it's tough for me to watch this stuff because I know it's not him. But when he is him, they hate him.
No, look, these people had their scripts already written. Their teleprompter was already. They have a narrative. They want to put him in a box. They want to characterize him in a certain way. That is not who Donald Trump was tonight. And when you have a flash poll from I think CBS, 75% approval across the board to 25%. Go ahead and have the Democrats show their true colors and sit there like they're next up to go in to see the orthodontist. I mean,
well, is it though, like with the comments there from Chuck Todd and Chris Matthews, they obviously there's a different side to him. He's rough and tumble. All of us have different times when we're giving a formal presentation. The State of the Union, that's not something you're going to do without a prompter. No president would do that. Yeah. But it seems like when he has a night like this, they're disappointed because it doesn't leave them as much room to criticize him.
Exactly. I mean, we weren't seeing raw Barack Obama when he came up and gave his speech. And so when you have the president really think through what his comments are going to be, what does he want to talk about? If he blew it, which he didn't, then he would own it. But he hit it out of the park. I mean, Democrats have nothing left to criticize on the policy. They want to talk about some other superfluous things that really don't hit the mark. I mean, America saw it. You saw the flash poll, and I think overwhelmingly thought, yeah, I actually agree with the president.
I think we have a little video that you talked about earlier, a little bit of video of the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi. She had a tough gig tonight because there wasn't a lot of this that she could stand up and cheer for because so much of it was policy. There she is, and there were times that she stood up and clapped for things, but it seemed like she had a lot of uncomfortable moments there, too.
Yeah.
It's a tough position to be in because the cameras are going to be on you if you're the minority leadership.
Nancy Pelosi was proving why all Americans should get a flu shot. I mean, look at her. She just, she's got this disgust on her. We're recognizing Americans.
Suggesting maybe she's not well?
No, I'm just saying.
She looks unhappy.
Look, these were times where she was sitting on her hands, refusing to clap, doing things. We were talking about ordinary Americans doing amazing things. People who are saving babies. People are serving their country. They're fighting ISIS. They're saving lives. And these Democrats sat on their hands, and it was so offensive. Maybe it didn't come across on the television as much as it was palpable in the room, how there was just this set of people who just could not stand up, could not put their hands together to thank the country.
When you were a Republican sitting there and President Obama was talking about things that clearly you wouldn't support?
Look, I was polite, but whenever we're talking about our troops, our flag, our country, our first responders, of course we all stand up as Americans. And that's the disgusting thing that I think people get fed up with Washington, D.C., and they just say, oh my gosh, you can't even agree that the red, white, and blue is the country that we stand for. I mean,
Well, quickly, let me get your reaction, too, because the Hollywood elite's not a fan of this speech tonight. But you saw Rob Reiner there. I mean, he immediately says the president's a racist and all kinds of other things and feels sorry for the media that they even have to take him seriously.
Yeah, but come on. Again, when you watch the totality of the speech and you see, I think America, the nice thing about giving a speech, and it was long, it probably could have been shorter, but when you have that much time, the president is talking directly to the American people. They don't have the filter of Chris Matthews. They don't have the filter of CNN to try to spin it the way they want to spin it. And Rob Reiner, he makes some, good movies and whatnot, but I really don't care what he has to say.
All right, that's it from him then. Thank you for coming in. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, last we heard from former White House aide Omarosa. She said she had a story to tell about her time in the White House. Now she's a brand new gig. Is she getting ready to spill the beans? That's next. Before we wrap things up, here's what's happening later today. The super blue blood moon will be seen early this morning in the west, especially in Alaska and Hawaii. It's a rare combination of a total lunar eclipse and what's known as a blood moon. And later today, we'll find out if the feds will raise interest rates. Well, from the White House to the Big Brother house, former White House aide Omarosa is headed back to her reality star roots. She's going to join the cast of Celebrity Big Brother next season. Her original claim to fame, as you'll remember, is when she joined the cast of The Apprentice, which is also how she met President Trump. She's reportedly writing a book, we think, about her White House experiences, or at least considering it. Well, most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you spent the evening and the early morning with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream.